Almost every effort to control speech and shut down either abusive speech or hate speech is a feminist project. About a year ago, and this is important because they don't just want to tell you lies, but they want to stop you being able to call them out on it too, by branding your jokes or your criticism of them abusive or harassing or hateful. And when you hear these words, it normally means that a conservative is talking, and it normally means that you've said something right. And because they don't have arguments, they instead call you names. They call you an abuser or a harasser or a misogynist or a racist. I mean, there are some genuine racists around, but not many of them. And this is what the left now does, because it knows that it's been telling you porkies. It knows that it's been lying to you, and it doesn't like being called out on it. In the era of social media where everyone can call them out on it, they need a new strategy. They need a new way of shutting you up. About a year ago, the United Nations suggested that we censor the entire internet to save feminist feelings. They released a report called Cyber Violence Against Women and Girls, a global wake-up call. Now, if I were writing a report on cyber violence, I could do it in about 140 characters, but somebody's already done it for me. This is the best strategy for dealing with mean words on the internet. It is not turning around and calling your interlocutor an abuser, harasser, a monster. There is a better way to deal with stuff if you don't like it on the internet. I printed this out and I sent it to Leslie Jones. Now the UN, talentless. The UN report contains a number of bizarre attempts to equate critical tweets on the internet with actual violence. Here's a direct quote from the UN report. Quote, "A cyber touch is recognized as equally harmful as a physical touch." End quote. A cyber touch is recognized as equally as harmful as a physical touch. What they're trying to do, and this is part of the problem with Black Lives Matter too, what they're trying to do is equate words with action, ideas with physical violence. Because if they can do that, if they can persuade you that your words damage them as much, require them to retreat into safe spaces, and they need trigger warnings for them, if they can persuade you that words are violence, as the left likes to say, well, it legitimizes their own violence against you. If you've seen any of the coverage of political rallies in this election season, this wonderful, chaotic, marvelous election season, you will know which direction the violence comes from, and it is not from supporters of Donald Trump. And the reason that they try to persuade you as much as they can that your words are violence is because it allows them to hit you afterwards with a clear conscience. So don't fall for it. Your UN report also says cyber violence places a premium on emotional bandwidth. I don't know what emotional bandwidth is. Anita Sarkeesian went to the UN and called for laws to deal with harassment, and she defined harassment as people telling her to shut up on Twitter. And this is the United Nations, suggesting in a report that we should censor the internet to save the feelings of professional provocateurs who go out and say appalling things about men, who go out deliberately trying to provoke reactions and then cry foul when they get those reactions and demand laws to punish the people who disagree with them. And this is a sort of nexus, this cry-bully nexus, these people who exist in a sort of quantum superstate of victimhood and aggressor. This is something that feminism and Islam have in common with one another. Speaking of Twitter, look what they did when they stacked their Trust and Safety Council with lunatics. Now, Twitter basically killed itself with these people. The company's now failing, can't find a buyer. I'm really sad about it. They can't find anyone to buy the company. Why? Well, at least in part because they got drawn into this narrative about abuse and harassment, and they thought the reason that nobody was joining Twitter was that there were all these mean words. Well, it wasn't mean words. Twitter started failing when they started clamping down on free speech, on First Amendment values. It's a private company. They don't have to abide by the First Amendment, but they should because it's good business. And they should because it's the right thing to do. And as soon as they started stopping people expressing themselves, using the language they wanted, playing around with dangerous ideas, telling jokes. I got banned for telling a joke. The company started to falter. And now, of course, it can't find a buyer. And this Trust and Safety Council, this is another way that liberals like to play with language. Trust and Safety Council, well, who could argue with that? Who could possibly disagree with a body set up to make sure that everybody is safe and can trust whatever? Who knows? But it wasn't really about that at all. It was actually a committee of very hardline progressive activists, feminists, Black Lives Matter activists, and so on, who wanted to limit the range of acceptable opinion on the internet. They wanted to say these opinions and this kind of language is okay, and the rest of you constitute a basket of deplorables. And that basket of deplorables should be ejected from the internet. You are, in Hillary Clinton's words, irredeemable. That's why Twitter failed. Of course, they also failed by booting their most fabulous and entertaining user while letting ISIS remain on the platform. If you recall, Twitter only really clamped down on terrorism after years of being ritually humiliated by the media for allowing ISIS to recruit on its platform. Only after being bullied by the media did Twitter do anything. These are the feminists who run Twitter, pandering to not just regressive social attitudes from Muslims in our own countries, but to Islamist terrorists, the really worst guys, the guys with the guns in Syria. They thought it was more of a priority to police microaggressions and jokes about feminists, me calling somebody a lesbianic harpy who looks like a man, more of a priority to them, even if it was true. It is true, she does look like a man. They thought that was more of a priority than getting terrorists off their platform. These are some of the ways in which this movement acts for Islam without perhaps meaning to. Now, to say that Islam has an issue with free speech would be like saying feminists have a problem with counting calories. Not only obvious, but entirely true. And we know the horrific state of free speech in Muslim countries. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, China jailed the most journalists in 2015, but 9 of the next 11 countries with the most jailed journalists were all Muslim countries. And speaking of 9/11, the top 7 deadliest countries for journalists are all more than 90% Muslim. Turkey, supposedly the moderate Muslim place, has a lock on Twitter and on Facebook. You probably don't know this. You can't post a map according to Facebook's terms of service. This is a company founded and built in America, supposedly the freest nation in the world. You cannot post a map on Facebook without violating its terms of service that shows Turkey and Kurdistan. Because the Turkish government have told Facebook that if you want to operate in Turkey at all of your users everywhere in the world have to conform to our censorship rules. And Twitter said, okay. On Twitter, you can be banned, and indeed the first ever arrest for a meme happened recently in Turkey when somebody compared President Erdogan to Gollum. Got a perfectly fair and reasonable comparison. When you see the picture, they do look alike. Got arrested for a meme in Turkey, and Twitter goes along with this stuff. Turkish journalists who are trying to resist their Islamist leaders, this being the country, of course, that whose own military has to stage a coup every 15 years because they don't trust their own government not to turn into lunatics. Turkish journalists trying to resist this stuff can find themselves simply nuked from Twitter at the behest of the Turkish government. It's not just within Muslim countries that Islam and free speech butt heads, of course. In a 2015 Center for Security Policy study of Muslims in America, they found that 30% of American Muslims, and this goes back to what I was saying about violence before, 30% of American Muslims believe that it is legitimate to use violence against people who insult Islam. So if you crack a joke about the Quran, if you crack a joke about Muhammad, if you crack a joke about anything to do with Islam, and it is, a self-evidently hilarious religion. It is funny. I mean, they look funny. The women look ridiculous. They're incredibly homophobic. Yet 5 times a day they've all got their asses in the air. I mean, it's funny. It's a funny religion. I mean, if left-wing comedians were a bit bolder, they could make much better jokes than I can about it, and sell out packed theaters. But if you make jokes about Islam, 30% of British Muslims believe that violence is an acceptable answer. So they have the same view on that as the feminists do. 33%, by the way, 33% of American Muslims believe that if the Constitution and Sharia law conflict, and Sharia law, remember, treats the word of a woman as worth half of that of a man in many circumstances. If Sharia and the Constitution conflict, Sharia should take precedence in any country in which Muslims live. According to Wenzel Strategies poll in 2012, 58% of Muslim Americans believe that criticism of Islam or Muhammad is not protected free speech under the First Amendment. 45% believe that those who mock Islam should face criminal charges. So basically, every other Muslim thinks that you should be in prison if you make a joke about Muhammad, and 30% of them think that it's okay to punch you in the face for doing it, in addition to sending you to prison. 12%, this is the statistic I really like. I don't like it, it's fucking terrifying, but this is the one that I want to leave you with. 12% of American Muslims, of Muslims living here, 1 in 10, believe that blasphemy against Islam should be punishable by death. That you should be killed for making jokes about Islam. This is a religion that murders homosexuals, that routinely oppresses women, but is so thin-skinned it can't cope with the joke. Which reminds you remarkably of feminists, doesn't it? With their lies and conspiracy theories, their bullying, their hectoring. But you dare to call them out and say, well, you know, that wage gap thing, actually, if you look at the numbers, you're an abuser, you're a harasser. How dare you? You must hate women. I don't hate women, but I've been characterized probably as, I don't know, aside from Donald Trump, America's leading misogynist. Why? Because I don't stand for dodgy numbers, and I don't believe in lying to people, and I don't think that you help women by lying to women. That is enough. That's enough for feminists. That is a capital crime. The entire world loves Malala. Do you know who Malala is? That little girl. Doesn't she look cute in her hijab? You know, sort of wandering around spouting sort of UN-friendly platitudes that her dad writes for her. Well, you might think she's cute, but here's something she said, which passes in the media for moderate. The more you speak about Islam and against all Muslims, the more terrorists we create. Sort of sounds like a threat, doesn't it? Like, be nice to me or I'll beat you up. Don't be mean about Muslims or, you know, lose another office block in New York. That's the real red thread running through these phrases that you hear that we're encouraged to believe are moderate. I think it should worry us. So Malala's opinion, of course, if we all just shut up and stop talking about Islam, do what Islam wants, which is, you know, institute Sharia law over and above the Constitution, then they won't need to shoot us or stab us or hang us from cranes. And that's the general sentiment of non-Muslim Americans towards criticism of Islam. Don't criticize it too harshly or they might kill you. This is not an attitude conducive to freedom. This is a country that was founded on freedom. This is a country that is great because of its freedom. You have an ability to go, do, say, be, dress, and speak however you please. But it is under threat, and it's under significant threat from two forces you would imagine would be opposing. The far left, with its gender politics, and the far right of Islam, the social conservatism, the reactionary social attitudes of Islam. But these two things, for some reason, have teamed up. They've teamed up because they don't like freedom very much. They've teamed up because they don't like the West very much. They don't like capitalism. They don't like property rights. They don't like any of the things that made this country a nice place to live, any of the things that attracted me to it. And it's very remarkable just how much they enjoy one another. That attitude of, you know, oh, just leave them alone and they won't come for us until it's too late, that is bowing to authoritarianism. It is the attitude that was held by German citizens to Hitler and by Russian citizens to Stalin.